Hello internet friends, welcome back to my channel. My name is Lindsay or Lijo, and today I have some tips for you if you're a sensor or even if you're another intuitive with how to deal with intuitives and sometimes what can be some very abstract thought, how to understand and communicate with them better. So if you would like to talk to me about this subject or anything related to your mental journey, you can book a video session with me below on Snug, and we're gonna start this video. So no matter if you're an intuitive savior or a sensory savior, we've all probably had a conversation like this before, in which you're talking to a person and you're talking about a particular subject, and the conversation is going well. And then all of a sudden they tell you about how this particular subject reminds them of this funny little pancake they made that morning. And I wonder if, pancakes, how they would hold up if they were your primary food group. And well, then what do you think pancakes, how would they hold up to space? Would they hold up the same way they do on Earth or not quite as much? And then all of a sudden you're like, wait, we were talking about X subject and now we're talking about space pancakes. The extroverted intuitive at their finest. Or maybe you're having a conversation with someone again about X subject, and then all of a sudden they bring up a comparison of something that's completely, seemingly unrelated, but for the fact of making their point about X subject more understandable. Now, all of a sudden they've grabbed some household object, they have a pencil in their hand, and they're telling you about how the point of leverage, the fulcrum, if you were to look at the fulcrum as the environmental mindset, and you were looking at the place of most resistance and the heaviest cognitive load as being, closest to that point of leverage, well, in fact, that would allow you to exude less effort on your own end, because the environment now brings a context around that that cognitive load, that place of resistance in your mind, and now you are able to actually achieve upward motion with less effort because of the sake of where you leveraged that environment as it's related to the challenging area. And to the introverted intuitive, this is getting their point across much clearer. And maybe some of you understand it, but maybe some of you are sitting back and scratching your head and you're just like, how do I deal with a person that is like this? How do I communicate to them in a way that they understand? And I have some tips for you on how to do that. All right, so first off the bat, clarity. Ask for clarity when clarity is in fact actually needed on your end. And what's really important here is to call out if they're being too abstract, because if you just ask for clarity and you don't really point out that they're being abstract, they might just give you another fun and exciting abstract answer. To them, makes a lot of sense. So what I would recommend is saying something like, hey, that was really abstract. Could you give me an example that it's more relevant to the subject in which we're speaking about? Number two, and particularly as it relates to understanding, is don't take intuitives too literally. NE and NI users tend to leverage a lot of analogies and metaphors. I do this quite often, and actually even just before when I was telling you about the pancake scenario with the extroverted intuitive, I'm referencing some sensory in there, right? But what is the point of the sensory? The sensory is to provide a metaphor in which that word could really be anything. It's movable. I'm just using it in that example to hold space for the concept. And so a lot of times I will get, comments related to some kind of instance, some kind of metaphor that I gave, and someone will look at it too literally. They'll be like, excuse me, my friend is, they have extroverted intuition and they don't like pancakes at all. So, I think your statement's wrong. It's like, okay, I'm not talking about the literal pancake. I'm talking about the idea of pancakes and how it plays into this greater whole. So know that many times they are not actually talking about literal things. Number three is to be patient with the direction of their cognition. Oftentimes intuitives will have to kind of wade through the abstract to then be able to ground themselves in the sensory. It's as if you have to traverse one plane to get to the next. Kind of like as if you lived in a hot air balloon all the time and then you always had to go from this hot air balloon down to landing each time you wanted to get to the sensory. Kind of similar process. So if you're a sensor in particular, it might be a little bit frustrating sometimes to deal with the intuitives because it seems like they're like in this weird land before they can kind of address what is real. Have some patience. We do get there eventually. We just usually need to work out our cognitive process before we end up there. Number 4 is if you don't need the additional clarity, then you don't have to ask. You don't have to ask just if you don't understand it, if it's not really important or relevant to understand it, because what will happen is now we are responsible for the translation process from intuitive language to sensory language. And imagine this as if it were just like regular languages, right? So let's say you speak English and you speak English all the time, but you do know some Spanish, but like you don't speak it very often, you don't know it very well, like pequeño. What we're gonna have to do is be like, oh, okay, I have to speak Spanish right now. Okay, so, and what's gonna happen is we're gonna be thinking really hard about it. We're probably gonna get it wrong. We might confuse you more, and we might not even get across what we're trying to say in the first place anyway. So hopefully we do. Hopefully you can understand, right? And it is our desire for people to be able to understand what we're saying, right? We do wanna communicate, but I would say don't pressure the intuitive if it's not really needed to have that additional form of clarity. However, like I said at point number 1, if you need the clarity, then be specific with what it is and why you need it tied to the original subject. And the last point is, remember reality is less relevant. So maybe you've made some big upgrade in your life. You got a new promotion, you got the new this, you got a new watch, there's this new thing happening over here, that sports team with the things, right? And you may be expecting some kind of rise from the intuitive, and maybe they give it to you, but maybe it's, you know, more related to you and how you're interacting, right? And maybe it's probably not really related to the sensory itself. And that's simply because the sensory is less relevant to us. We're not accessing it in the same way as we are, you know, the other functions in our brain. Don't be looking for a rise or like the same attention as it relates to the sensory items. You know, it's nothing personal. It's just cognitive. So that's it for this video. I hope it helps you to understand a little bit better how intuitives are looking at the world, some ways in which you can communicate with them better, hopefully get some clarity in the areas that you need it, and then also where to give them some patience if they're a little bit slower than you, especially in the sensory. So I will see you guys in my next video. Till next time, goodbye, internet friends.